Hello students. In the previous lectures, we discussed about the impact of Eurocentrism, views from the West and the need for a non-Western theory of international relations. In this lecture, we will discuss about the criticisms against the attempt towards a non-Western theory of international relations. Then we will discuss about the idea of a global international relations discipline which was first introduced by Professor Amitabh Acharya in his International Studies Association presidential address in the year 2013. We will also discuss about the challenges faced by the international relations in its quest to become a global discipline. Our discussion will end with some concluding remarks. Now let me discuss about some of the criticisms that is there for a non-Western theory of international relations. The first is that if you look the issue empirically, you will find that the international relations of the Asian region are not fundamentally different from those of the Europe. You talk of anarchy, you talk of survival, you talk of balance of power, that had all operated in the interstate interactions in the ancient period. From the Western perspective, maybe India emerged as a separate and independent nation state or sovereign nation state in 1947. But if you look at the ancient Indian history, if you look at the medieval Indian history, it was not just international system, the same system was operating in India also. There were so many states, there was no all India government that controlled the anarchical behavior of the kingdoms. So there was no in a sense global authority or global government that was there. So it was also anarchical. So anarchy is not something very different, and maybe you understand the concept of anarchy from the realist perspective. That was already there. You think of diplomacy. I had already given the example of diplomacy in Indian texts like Ramayana and Mahabharata. So these kind of things, balance of power. The Kauravas were balancing the power of the Pandavas were balancing the power of the Kauravas, the kings, kingdoms, they are also balancing their power with each other. So these are not very new concept. Maybe the Europeans popularized these kind of notions because of colonialism, because of colonial system of education, but it's not that these kind of ideas were not there. But so that is my point, that empirically it's a challenge that these kind of things that was already there. You have to think about this issue when you think of formulating your own theory of international relations. Epistemologically also, critics point out that it is unscientific to emphasize or incorporate a particular culture or worldview of a particular nation or region in the international relations theory, as a legitimately scientific theory should seek universality or generality. So one of the conditions for having your own theory is that it should be generally applicable. So it should be universally applicable. So if you develop a theory, if you develop a concept that takes into account your own history and culture, and it doesn't think about the others or how it is applicable to other countries, that's again a challenge. So you may have your own understanding, but that is not going to be accepted by others because it doesn't fulfill the condition of generality or universalism as required for a theory. The Chinese scholars, especially the younger ones who have studied in the West, think that it is unscientific, even unnecessary to emphasize the so-called Chinese characteristics. So those Chinese students, those Chinese scholars who have Western education system, or those who are studying in the West or in America, they don't think that you need to have your own theory of international relations, because that may not be generally applicable to others. A similar criticism can be found among the Korean international relations scholar in regard to the attempt to build a Korean style of international relations theory. Any theory or theorization based on Korea's unique historical experience, the criticism goes on, must be tested under the principle of generality. You think of Chinese, you think of Indians, you think of Korea, whatever theory you develop, you should explain that you may formulate on your own experience, but that should be generally applicable to others. Otherwise, why should others will accept your theory if it's not helpful to them? Normative criticisms of attempts to build a non-Western international relations theory highlight the relationship between power and knowledge. you know that there is a relationship between power and knowledge, and those who are in power, basically they have got the Western system of education. Their understanding of these issues would be different. Those who are the local politicians or local people who are in the power position of the country, they have a different understanding. So how you make a relationship between power and knowledge? If Britain was not a superpower before the Second World War, maybe we would not have got the kind of English education, or we would not have followed their kind of education. So because of our colonial experience, because of our colonial exposure, so we got a lot of British ideas, British idea of international relations, idea of nation state, and so many other things. So you can explain that in terms of power, in terms of knowledge. So knowledge has a relationship with power. So those who are powerful countries, they have hold over knowledge, right? So if India emerges today as a major world power, so it may have hold on Indian version of international relations, and it may popularize those concepts. The concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, or maybe the concept of Vishwamitra, or this kind of all set of this Amrit Kal, Sagarmala, these all concepts, they may be popular in other countries. Once you rise into power, once you make others to understand your concept of power, your understanding of history, but the one condition is that it must be generally applicable to others. It should meet the condition of universality or generality. There is a relationship between knowledge and power, so you cannot have your own understanding of international relations, or you cannot formulate a theory of international relations and claim that it is universally applicable. Normative criticisms of attempts to build a non-Western international relations theory highlight the relationship between power and knowledge. How the emergence of Britain as a superpower, as the most powerful country of that particular period of time, how it helped to have monopoly over discipline of international relations, and how they needed a discipline to justify their imperialism and colonial policies. Similarly, you found that knowledge and power had a relationship with the American emergence of a superpower. They needed the discipline of international relations to fight a Cold War with the Soviet Union. So, knowledge and power, they are complemented to each other. They have a deep relationship with each other. So, you have to understand that also in the context of global south, in the context of the non-Western countries. So, if you are powerful today and you develop theory of international relations based on your power position in the international politics, that may repeat the same thing as has been done by United Kingdom or the America. So that is again a problem for theorizing or for thinking of your own view of international relations theory. Critics also point out that although theory building is particularly in the non-Western context commonly begin by problematizing the Western dominated international relations, the ongoing scholarly practices and discourses associated with non-Western international relations theory can also entail or reproduce the same hierarchic and exclusionary structure of knowledge production, which can fall prey to a particular national or regional interest. So the point is, if you criticize the West for its exclusionary or hierarchic understanding of international relations, you are going to do the same, you are going to repeat the same. So what is the difference between their theory of international relations and your theory of international relations? That is again a major issue. Echoing this point, another scholar notes that although it is our responsibility to make international relations more pluralistic and democratic, the most intellectual endeavors to construct non-Western international relations theory in Asia runs the risk of inviting nativism. Nativism means you glorify your own culture, you glorify your civilization. In a way, you close your window to the air to come in, or you don't understand the other's perception. So that is the problem with nativism. So you justify everything as Europe justified everything. What was Europe was everything modern, everything's associated with modernity and development. So you are also going to do the same. You are going to do the or repeat the same. So that is the problem with nativism. Andrew Harrell, an international relations scholar in the United Kingdom, has also added that although developing culturally specific ways of understanding the world undoubtedly encourages greater pluralism, attempts to do so can also lead to a national and regional inwardness that works to reproduce the very ethnocentricities that are being challenged. So, again if you become methodologically nationalist, or if you just become nativist, again you are doing the same mistake as has been done by the Americans or Europeans. So, if you are criticizing them, you should do something different, you should come out the very criticisms you made against them. So, that is the kind of criticism. For this reason, scholars often use the term post-Western international relations as opposed to non-Western international relations. When you are talking of non-Western international relations, you are basically going to focus on your version of international relations theory, your understanding of international relations. But when you are talking of post-Western IR, you want to go out of the traditional Eurocentric problem in international relations and focus on something combining the best elements of your understanding history, culture and traditions of the global south along with the global north. So, you are combining both the elements and think of something called post-Western international relations. So, the scholars are now talking of a new concept called global international relations that seeks to bridge the current Eurocentrism in international relations and also avoiding the pitfalls of the non-Western theory of international relations. And when you go beyond these two hotly debated and even contested kind of epistemologies, you are thinking of a global international relations that would be more inclusive and pluralistic in terms of theory, in terms of practices. So, that is now the current focus of the international relations scholar for making international relations as world international or making it as global international relations discipline. The idea of global international relations was first introduced by Amitabh Acharya, an Indian American, in his presidential address to the annual convention of the International Studies Association in the year 2013. To him, the idea of global international relations encompasses at least 6 major aspects. The first is, when you talk of global international relations, it is inclusive, grounded in the ideas, institutions, intellectual perspectives and practices of both Western and non-Western societies. So, it is not that you develop a theory based on either Western experience or the non-Western experience. Rather, you need a theory, you need a discipline of international relations that bridges the gap between the two, and you think of an inclusive, all comprehensive discipline of international relations that is conscious of the needs and requirements of the global north along with the global south. Second, global international relations does not merely supplant Western theories, rather it subsumes them. It urges international relations theorists to rethink their assumptions and extend their scope. So, basically the focus of global international relations is not just to you borrow some ideas from the Western theories, you get some ideas from your own experience, that is not the reason. Rather, it needs to focus on the aspect that there is a need to rethink the assumptions, the arguments of the mainstream theories, the critical theories, and particularly when you do that, you are acknowledging the significance of the other part of the world, and in a way you are also helping to extend the scope of international relations theory. Third, global international relations emphasizes the importance of regions, regionalisms and contribution of area studies. It calls for the acknowledgement of regional diversity and agency. Earlier you were not thinking of an international relations theory that takes into account the regions, the different cultures, the different communities. And when you are talking of global international relations theory, so it should bridge those regional divisions, rather it should be more inclusive of different regions, different communities living in those regions, and in a way it acknowledges the contribution of regional diversity and agency. In India, we also call this as unity in diversity. So, you maintain unity while respecting the diversity. So, the same principle we can apply for the global international relations theory. Fourth, the global international relations theory calls for a new understanding of universalism or universality, or applying a concept, a theory which is applicable to all. It is thinking of everybody's welfare, it is thinking of the whole world, it is thinking of the whole planet, not just about Europe, about America, or about my world, about your world. So, that is this kind of exclusionary divisions should not be there in global international relations theory. Fifth, a truly global international relations theory cannot be based solely or mainly on cultural exceptionalism and parochialism. As we discussed about this issue, you can't expect exceptionalism in international relations. America is different, India is different, that's fine, but you cannot, all countries are different, but on that basis you cannot expect special treatment by others. That is the problem. So global international relations is going beyond this kind of exceptionalism and parochialism. So finally, the global international relations takes a broad conception of agency in global order building, giving agency of non-Western countries. So basically, earlier you had no agency, now you are emerging as a major power, you are emerging as a global power, so you have greater agency than the past. So this agency should be recognized, this contribution should be recognized for building the global international relations. However, there are lots of challenges in this direction. The first is to discard the expectation that non-Western theories or knowledge of the international system should resemble or model on the dominant Western theories. So those who are from the global north, they should understand this, they should acknowledge that the theories developed in the regional context, developed in the global south perspective, that should not exactly conform to the mainstream theories of IR or the way they understand, formulate and conceptualize IR. There is a mutual recognition needed in this context that the world is diverse, the world is plural, and we should not have a kind of understanding, a kind of theory that is based on only one region or one country's perspective. In other words, turning the discipline's attention to non-Western modes of theorizing should encourage greater self-reflection on the ways in which scholars in the West theorize. So when you theorize about any particular issue or when you think of theory, so your theorization is fine, but it should not be just based on Europe's or American experience. When you theorize, you have to also think about other continents, other countries and other cultures and civilizations. So that will help you to make an all-inclusive theory that is really and truly general in nature or universal in nature. Second is to overcome Eurocentrism, the belief that the people, ideas, civilization and history of Europe constitute the dynamic center of world history and the ideal or norm against which the non-Europeans are to be measured. So this is again dangerous, we have already discussed this issue. So your concept, your perception, your theories, that should not be based on this glorification of Europe, glorification of America. Rather, you should come out this ethnocentrism, you should come out this Western centrism or Eurocentrism and think of theory, think of concept that is based on both Europeans, non-Europeans, Americans, Indians, Chinese, Koreans, everyone. In order to fully embrace a global international relations, we need to unsettle the Western dominance in the foundation of IR discipline. Outside the West, also fully acknowledge the dynamics of everyday knowledge production across the world. So the issue is, we have to recognize that it is not that we have to break up the Eurocentric nature of international relations or Europe and American domination in international relations. We should also think and fully acknowledge that there is dynamics of everyday knowledge production across the world. These day-to-day experiences, these kind of experiences, this would be included in the discipline of international relations. Let me just explain this point by giving one example. Earlier many scholars, even some Indian economists, they were thinking that India was notorious for Hindu rate of growth. You cannot grow more than 3.5%, but that has been proved as a myth. India has already debunked this kind of perception, and India has not only grew more than 7% on an average, rather it has sometimes also grown more than the single digit, and that is the double digit growth we have experienced for so many years. So so there are so many misperceptions, so many misunderstandings about a particular country or culture. So this kind of misperception should be removed, and it is also the responsibility of international relations scholars to think about this kind of issues, this kind of perceptions. So knowledge of the West, knowledge of the non-West, knowledge of the global South, knowledge of the global North, that should be mutually inclusive to each other, respect to each other, rather than you create a kind of division between the West and the rest. So that should not be there. Third, while many scholars are united around a call for a global international relations theory, it cannot be said that there is only one grand strategy for theorizing the global south perspectives. In many cases, it would be inaccurate to refer to a single perspective that could be seen to represent a region or even country, let alone the majority of world population. So the problem is, who are actually the countries of global south? That is not, all countries cannot be think of a theory, or they don't have a single perspective. So when we are talking of global south, it consists of so many continents, diverse countries, diverse cultures, countries having different history. So so this is not a single word. We have to understand that we will develop a grand strategy that is applicable to all the countries of global south. So we should come out of this kind of mindset. Scholars do not even agree on a single definition of which states the Latin American region comprises, let alone what a Latin American perspective of international relations is. So even if you think of Africa, you think of Latin America, so there cannot be a Latin American perspective or there cannot be an African perspective, because there are many countries in Africa. Each country may have a different history, culture, maybe different civilization. So that is again the problem. Similarly, it has proved difficult to define a coherent theoretical body that would constitute a Chinese school of international relations, given there are different philosophers and they have different interpretation of their work. Issues like this make it difficult for the global south scholars to rally around a single theoretical perspective. If you take the example of India or China, it is not that all the philosophers are saying the same thing or they are in agreement on every issue. We have Kautilya, we have Gandhi. In China also you had Mao, you have Deng, and you have also Jinping. The problem is there are different administrators, there are different philosophers, they have their own understanding. If you have only one kind of thought, that may help you to understand so many things, but we know that from history, from different literatures, we know there are different philosophers and each one has different kind of understanding on world history, on international relations. So Siba, an African international relations scholar, writes that one of the main problems associated with international relations theory from the global south is that it does not have a central structure, no central command and no appointed spokesperson, as a result of a lack of a coherent historical identity and conjoined agendas. So the problem is, we may think of global south, we may think of non-west, but or we may think of the rest, but the concept does not actually take into account the diversities of culture, diversities of history, diversities of experience. Another problem is the risk of fragmentation that lies in the power asymmetries between the global south states themselves. Inequalities are not exclusive to the north-south divide. The emergence of strong economies and regional powers within the global south, such as India, China or many other countries, has raised new issues of marginalization and dominance among the states already marginalized by the north. So nowadays countries like India, like China, like Indonesia or maybe Turkey, so they are coming out of the shackles of imperialism, neo-colonialism, and they are emerging as major world powers. So in the process they are becoming rich, their contribution to world GDP is increasing. So this is also again creating a kind of divide between the countries of the south, and it is not that the division was only exclusive to north and south. So this is again another problem that we have to think when we think of global international relations. Finally, globalizing international relations scholarship also necessitates a reflexivity and self-criticism. It is equally important to be self-reflective with our own discipline in teaching and research, as well as with the power dimensions in local knowledge production. So we have to also be self-reflective, be self-introspective. Sometimes we if you look at the writings of many scholars, particularly in the global south, you will find sometimes they have justified imperialism, sometimes they have justified mass killings, sometimes they have justified authoritarianism, sometimes they have justified totalitarianism. So we have to self-reflective. It's not that whatever we are doing everything is fine. There are problems, there are issues, and we should acknowledge those issues so that we do not do the same mistake next time. So that is again another challenge for developing a new and global international relations discipline. Now let me conclude with some major points. Now, that the discipline of international relations has undertaken a long journey in its quest for being a truly global discipline, and the movement in this direction is still going on. So it's an incomplete project, the process is still going on. So we have discussed how even in Europe, even in America, we first we had international politics, then we had discussed about international relations, then global politics or world politics, what we call. So it has taken a long journey. It's not that the journey has stopped. Now the discipline is taking a different kind of journey. So and this journey is now not complete, or the process is still going on. In order to speed up the process, there is a need for cross-cultural dialogue. At present, the conversation on a globalizing international relations are a monologue, not a dialogue. The conversation must be with each other and not merely about each other. So I am talking particularly of the conversation that is going on between the countries of the global south and the countries of the global north, or the scholar belonging to these different regions. So this conversation about a global international relations discipline should not be that you are talking at each other. Rather, instead of talking at each other, you should talk to each other. So the conversation should have been among various conclaves of national and regional schools and perspectives of international relations, like the American, European, Indian, Chinese, Korean, Arabic, or even the Japanese school of international relations, even the Islamic, Hindu, Christian, and different kinds of religions. This conversation is not going to stop, or it should not stop. Rather, the conversation should go on, and it is not that the conversation should be in a monologue form. Rather, it should go on a dialogue form that would enrich the discipline, that would contribute for making the discipline an inclusive and all comprehensive discipline. Post-colonialism's contribution lie in problematizing race, gender, sexuality as a major variable in constructing a Eurocentric international relations, the concept of the nation, and even the term international. These powerful tools of analysis must be strengthened for more inclusive research. So we know a lot of things through the post-colonial theory. So this kind of problematization in the race, gender, sexuality, or the concept of international, the concept of nation, this would be borrowed, this would be widely used for deconstructing a lot of concepts, lot of theories that are purely Eurocentric. In other words, deconstruction as a method to debunk the myth and expose the Eurocentrism in international relations become an important tool in the move towards a global and plural international relations. So you have to follow the method of deconstruction. If you construct something, there is a need to reconstruct something, there is a need to deconstruct something, because in the process of construction, deconstruction and reconstruction, you come out with new ideas that ultimately contribute for a better discipline, for a global discipline. This is not to conclude that the old theories have become irrelevant. Rather, they did serve a purpose during a certain context and time. It is time to move forward. It is time to reinvent international relations, to revive it. So it doesn't mean that the movement towards global international relations means that we have to abandon everything European, everything American. Rather, if there are some theories that are Eurocentric, we need to reformulate those theories, keeping in view of the experience of the countries of global south, their culture, their history, their experience. A movement towards a global international relations will have to revolve around a rewriting of international relation textbooks to include perspectives and historical narratives from the global south that seek to deconstruct the European exceptionalism and the classical canons of international relations theory. So we have to start the process from the textbook itself. Most of the textbooks in India, in many other countries, you will find the dominance of Western theories, Western narratives, Western concept, all that are Eurocentric, and you have to break this Eurocentrism. You have to break this domination of a particular continent or country, and that can be possible once you decolonialize your textbooks, once you go out of this kind of colonialization and focus on your own experience, own culture, own history, by including the best elements in the West, including the best elements in your own country, by including the best elements in your neighborhood, in your own region. So these are all important effort and that will make your discipline more inclusive, more accommodating the diversities of the world. At the same time, perspectives and tools that are more sympathetic and sensitive to more pluralistic international relations like constructionism should be further strengthened to give international relations a more inclusive identity. So, there are some theories which are sympathetic to the cause of the South, to the cause of the non-Western countries like constructionism. If they are good and if we can reformulate those theories, derive from those theories, that would also be helpful. So, it is not that you need a break from all these theories, these concepts to develop your own theory. That is problematic, as we have already discussed. So, you need to have a global discipline of international relations by incorporating major changes, day-to-day experiences from all parts of the world, from all cultures, from all histories, from all the texts that are really beneficial for making the discipline a truly global international relations discipline. So, that is how our understanding, our movement towards making international relations a global discipline would really be fruitful, really be beneficial for every country, every region, and for the discipline itself. So, thank you very much for your patient hearing. So, we would stop here. Thank you very much.